The wind that slid down from the mountain carried a taste of iron and pine. It rattled through the empty men dragged Clara through the dust, toward the waiting cart. Her feet stumbled, bare toes scraping stone, blood smearing where a nail had split. The board around her neck swung with every jerk. She kept her chin up, though her lips bled where she'd bitten them to keep from crying out. And then, from the shadow near the livery, a shape moved. A man leaned against the post, hat brim pulled low, coat long enough to hide the Winchester slung across his back. His boots were cracked, his face carved with weather and war. Folks knew him by the limp in his step and the scar. He shifted, spat dust, and muttered to no one, "Hell's getting greedy." The sheriff's men heaved Clara onto the cart. Jonah's eyes followed the rope cutting into her wrists, the sign branding her worse than any hot iron. He'd seen prisoners before, back in the war, men marched out under false charges, hanged on rumors. He'd done nothing then. The shame of that still gnawed. A crow landed on the gallows beam where she was bound to hang at dawn. Its black feathers gleamed, and it croaked as if mocking the crowd. The sheriff called it an omen. Jonah called it cowardice. As the cart jolted forward, Jonah pushed off the post and followed slow, boots dragging dust. He did not know why, only that the rope on her wrists burned his own memory raw. He carried no promise, no tender words, but he carried a rifle, and sometimes in this land that was the only kind of mercy left. Night would fall soon. By morning, the mountain woman would swing, unless something broke the silence of the crowd, unless someone, reluctant, bitter, but still breathing, stood between her and the rope. And Jonah Hale, limping behind that cart, felt the mountain wind whisper her name against his scar. The cart creaked along the rutted road, wheels whining under the weight of a woman bound for death. The sky bruised purple as the last light sank behind the ridges. Torches flickered in the hands of townsfolk who followed, not too close, not too far, enough to see, not enough to share. Their boots scuffed in unison, a muted drum of judgment. Clara kept her eyes slow but steady, carried across the hush. You all drink from the well I kept clean. You all bury your children with herbs I gave to ease their pain. You call me witch now, but you'll call me saint when the fever comes again. It was not a plea. It was a warning. A quiet blade of truth laid against the crowd's throat. Some looked down. Some spat. The sheriff only sneered. Jonah felt his chest tighten. That voice, not broken, not begging, but raw with the grit of someone who had buried too much already. He saw his late wife's eyes in hers, the way she'd looked at him the day the cholera took her, as if asking why a man built to fight wars couldn't fight death at his own doorstep. The sheriff raised his hand. Dawn, folks. She swings at dawn. Let her stew in her sins till first light. They chained her to the post beneath the gallows, leaving the sign on her chest. The crowd began to scatter, torchlight drifting like fireflies back to the town. Only Jonah lingered, leaning on the fence rail, watching the way the mountain wind tugged Clara's hair across her face. She lifted her head, met his eyes. You watching to see me hang, stranger? Jonah swallowed the bitter taste in his mouth. I seen too many. The mountain groaned with nightfall. Coyotes sang in the distance. Jonah stood, torn between the silence of a man who survives by turning away, and the voice that said survival without defiance is just another kind of death. And for the first time since the war, he found his boots carrying him forward instead of back. Night wrapped the canyon in cold silence. The moon was only a thin blade above the pines, its light spilling weak and pale. The sheriff's men left a single fire burning near the gallows, enough to keep watch, though none of them stayed. They trusted the chains, the rope, and the weight of a town's judgment to hold Clara. Jonah Hale did not return to town. He sat on the far side of the canyon fence, back against a post, his rifle across his knees. The fire snapped and hissed, throwing sparks into the black sky. Coyotes called, their howls threading through the wind. Clara shifted against her chains. Her wrists bled, the iron biting deeper every time she moved. Why? He let the fire answer for a long moment, the crackle filling the space where his words should have gone. Finally he said, because I know what it is to be chained for someone else's lie. Clara turned her head, the sign on her chest creaking against the rope. Then you know the shame is worse than the iron. He did. He remembered the deserter boy in Tennessee, rope already on his neck, eyes begging not for life but for someone to say he wasn't what they called him. Jonah had said nothing. The shame had eaten him hollow since. You aimed to save me, cowboy? Clara asked, almost mocking. Jonah's mouth twitched, bitter. You don't want savin from me. I'm no savior. Just a man trying to keep breath in his lungs. Clara leaned forward, the chain clanking. Her eyes burned in the firelight, fierce in a way that unsettled him. Then breathe near me. That's all. Don't let me choke alone in the morning wind. The words struck deeper than a bullet. Not a plea for rescue, but a demand for witness, for company in the moment of the rope. Jonah looked away, his jaw tight. You talk like you already gave up, he muttered. She shook her head, strands of hair falling over her face. No. I talk like a woman who's been tried and hanged 100 times already in whispers and stares. Tomorrow's rope just makes it honest. The fire popped. Jonah found himself staring at the sign swinging on her chest. The letters which glared, burned into the wood. He wanted to rip it free, break it under his boot. But he sat still, nails digging into the worn stock of his rifle. After a silence that stretched like the canyon he saw faces, his wife's paling skin, his little boy coughing blood, the deserter swinging on the rope. He felt the mud of battlefields, the reek of powder, the groan of men shot in the dark. He breathed once, twice, then opened his eyes. "I buried more than I saved," he said flatly. "That's what broke me." Clara's gaze didn't falter. "Then maybe you still got one left to save." Her words settled into him like embers sinking into ash. Not a plea, not a cry, but a quiet order. He almost laughed at the absurdity. A woman bound for death ordering a man like him into her cause. And yet, under the crackle of the fire, Jonah felt the first spark of something he thought long dead. The possibility of standing for someone else, even if it cost him. The canyon wind shifted. The fire threw her shadow long against the gallows beam, and Jonah knew he would not walk away when dawn came. The canyon lay in black silence, broken only by the low hiss of the fire. Dawn was still hours off, but the air already smelled of endings. The rope above Clara swayed, whispering in the wind, promising her body would swing before another sun crossed the ridge. Jonah Hale hadn't moved from his place by the fence. His rifle lay across his knees, his fingers flexing against the wood. Every ghost he carried weighed on him heavier than iron. He thought of walking back into town, letting the law take its course, swallowing the shame like he always had. Then Clara spoke. "You sit there like a stone, soldier. But stones crack when the river pushes rough wood, cracked, edges still warm from torch smoke. The rope around it snapped beneath his calloused hands. He set it in the flames. The word which curled and blackened, smoke rising like a curse undone. Clara's breath caught. For the first time, her eyes softened. "That's dangerous, what you just did." Jonah grunted. Sometimes danger's the only honest thing left. He drew his knife, the blade dull but steady. He tested the chain where it looped through the post. It was iron, thick, built to hold horses or worse. He sawed, sparks biting off the metal. The sound rang sharp through the canyon. "Sheriff'll gut you," Clara whispered. "Sheriff's gut don't scare me." Jonah's voice was gravel. "I've buried men with more reason to live." The chain gave with a crack. Clara stumbled forward, There was one place, if they could reach it, a hollow cave high in the cliffs, where he wanted whiskey from taxmen and soldiers. Few knew it. Fewer dared climb that far. "Come on," he said, voice low, steady. "It's uphill or it's a rope." Clara gritted her teeth and climbed. The wind roared through the pines, carrying the sound of the hunt upward, the town tearing itself apart in the dark, searching for the woman they'd named a witch, and the man who had chosen to stand with her. But the mountain, old and stubborn, seemed to fold around them as if it remembered other outcasts, other fugitives, and was willing to shelter one more. By the time dawn split the sky, the mountain was bleeding gold. Leashes. Shouts rose and fell like a tide. But the higher the sun crept, the clearer it became. The mountain was larger than their fury. The rocks, the cliffs, the hidden bends of the trail swallowed sound and scent. The hunt lost its teeth. Jonah sat with his rifle across his knees, eyes narrowed. His limp throbbed like a curse in his bones, but he stayed sharp. Clara sat beside him, wrists wrapped in cloth torn from his shirt, the wound still angry red but no longer bleeding. She stared out at the valley, at the gallows beams still visible in the far distance, stark against the morning haze. "They'll not forget," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. "They'll carry my name in whispers, in curses." Jonah shifted, spat into the dirt. "Leche vispir. Better a living witch than a dead saint." Clara turned her head. Her eyes softened, not gratitude, not love, but something rawer. Recognition. "You broke more than my chains, soldier. You broke the silence." The words dug into him deeper than any wound. He had lived half his life shackled to silence, watching, not moving, letting others swing. Now, he felt something loosen in his chest, some knot untying. A cry rose from below. The hounds had lost the trail. Deputies cursed, voices fading as they fanned the wrong way. The sheriff roared, but the mountain swallowed him whole. One by one, the torches dwindled. By noon, the canyon lay empty again, save for the broken gallows beams swaying in the wind. Clara's head sagged against the stone. Her voice was little more than a rasp. "I should bury that rope. Burn it, like you burned the sign." Jonah shook his head. He pulled something from his coat, the severed piece of chain he had cut in the night, still cold and heavy in his palm. He laid it between them. "Don't bury it," he said. "Don't burn it. Keep it. Proof you lived." Clara touched the chain, fingers tracing the jagged edge where it had broken. Long shadows over the ridge. When they finally moved, it was not toward the town. It was deeper into the mountains, where the trails thinned and only the stubborn survived. The land was cruel, but it was honest, and for two broken souls, honesty was more merciful than any crowd. Days later, when the sheriff's men finally gave up their hunt, a few townsfolk crept to the canyon to stare at the empty gallows. The plank with which was gone, the chain snapped, the trail to the mountains washed clean by rain. But in the dust by the gallows post, someone had left a single stone, flat, smooth, carved with a line that might have been a scar, or a river, or simply the mark of a blade. Folks argued what it meant. A warning. A sign. A blessing. The boy who had spoken in the square picked it up and hid it under his pillow. To him, it meant something simple, that silence could break, that shame could be burned, that a witch might just be a healer, and that a man with a limp might still climb high enough to save. Underscore 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 the mountain kept its secrets. The town kept its whispers. And somewhere beyond the ridges, a woman carried a chain in her pocket and a man carried fewer ghosts in his sleep. The fire of their defiance smoldered quiet, but it never died.